The Belgian government made their decision. Soft-shoe the terror threat. Make it seem to the killers that they were not part of the international manhunt against them. Perhaps they would escape the carnage. Almost 36 bodies at their airport proves how incredibly naive and foolish they were. So here we go again. Another turning point in the war against the Islamic State and their followers. But the cliche has merit, because what happened in Brussels forces all civilized peoples to rethink security again, leading us to the Republican candidate for president, who has made immigration a cornerstone of his campaign. And with a state such as Arizona voting tonight in the primary, where the belief is killers are crossing the border every day, does this attack make Donald Trump invincible? The world has changed yet again, and we have to dig out of the rut talking and arguing about things that won't save a single life and get to the facts. I'm Ed Berliner, and this is The Hardline for Tuesday, March 22nd, 2016.
I know we're all watching this right now, and this scene is just so horrific. 1 minute, people are going about their day. The next minute, people are running for their lives.
Oh my God. So then we heard evacuate. They don't know where do you evacuate to.
I'm so scared.
And we just ran.
You weren't sure if there was going to be a third. You weren't sure if there was going to be a fourth.
This is not an isolated incident. This is a war with radical Islamic terrorism. ISIS has declared jihad on Europe and on the United States of America.
This is yet another reminder that the world must unite. We must be together, regardless of nationality or race or faith.
We must confront this threat together. We must defend democracy and defeat terror.
You've got to hit ISIS so hard and you've got to take them out.
This is a terrorist attack in the heart of Europe.
But although they attack our way of life and they attack us because of who we are, we will never let them win.
We will do whatever is necessary to support our friend and ally Belgium in bringing to justice those who are responsible.
Our prayers are with Brussels, as is our solidarity.
Let's get a few things straight here right at the top. Uncovering, arresting, bringing in alive, or leaving a trail of dead terrorists across the landscape makes so many people feel safe and sound. Heartened by the concept, the world is doing everything they can to bring these killers not only to justice, but to their rightful resting place in a body bag. The capture of the man alleged to have been a key part of the Paris bombings was ballyhooed as a major victory against the Islamic State, with so many experts saying he would provide a wealth of information and was a turning point against the enemy. It was a pacifier moment for the world, one where the caveat was buried deep in the exultation. These killers don't plan for a one-off event, and their chameleon nature of attacks means, especially in momentary victory, we are truly at this time not really safer than we were yesterday. So here come the harsh realities. We are joined by a former undercover counterterrorism expert, an operative for the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Much of what he did still remains top secret to this day, Mubin Shaikh. Also, the senior political scientist at the RAND Corporation, a career Army officer with expertise in homeland defense and strategic planning, Richard Brennan. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us. And Mubin, let me begin with you with a very simple statement. Looking at what happened in Brussels, is it not fair to say that when it comes to fighting this enemy, we haven't learned a thing?
I would agree with that. I think, for starters, Belgium has the highest number of foreign fighters per capita than any other country in Europe. France followed closely with second, Germany, UK. This is not over. This is just still unfolding.
Let me get right to what you said about the population of Brussels. This is an area and a country that has no-go zones. They don't want to say it, and many people don't want to say it out loud, but let's be honest about it. This is a place right now where they say there are hundreds of terrorists at this moment still living there, yet the government refuses to do anything about it. Are we looking at a time now because of this, when the damn cliches have got to stop? You've got to start going after them. You've got to root them out. You've got to do whatever it takes to find them before they kill more people.
Well, unfortunately, that's easier said than done in many cases. I think what the harsh reality is once we realize what is in fact needed, I don't know if people are ready to commit to that. It's going to be a long-term effort. The communities that are there, whether they're called no-go zones or breeding grounds for radicalization and extremism, it's going to be very difficult. We can't apply a military application in this context. The heavy police and infiltration efforts that are going to be required need to be stepped up considerably, and that's not something that's done overnight. So it's a very, very difficult situation, and I'm putting that very politely.
I want you to stand by because you said something in there, and I'm going to come to Rick Brennan on this because, Rick, you've got a lot of experience with this. When Mubin says there are things, he alludes to the fact that there are things that are going to need to be done that we must commit to. No military applications, but things that we are not comfortable with. Rick, what are those things in your opinion?
Well, Ed, you're raising a really important point, because if you look at the countries that have just been discussed, Belgium, France, Germany, Great Britain, other Western countries to include the United States, these breeding ground communities have generated have a generation of youth that are emerging from this, that are disassociated from the society within which they live. And in the name of diversity, we have allowed these communities to go really unwatched to a very large extent. And it's from these communities that you're getting the people going to Syria, going to other parts of the world, and then coming back and committing homegrown terrorism. So we have to be willing to, one, take a hard look at these communities, to make certain that diversity isn't driving everything that we're doing, that we realize that in order to be this melting pot of a country, which has made us so great over the years, these people need to assimilate into our societies rather than being independent enclaves.
All right, now you've used a couple of words in here, a couple of phrases. Hard look at things, diversity, assimilation. And of course, Ruben brought up the phrase breeding grounds here. All right, Rick, I'll give it to you. You're all right on everything here. Then what is it? Let's cut through the excrement here for a moment, if you will. What is it that we need to do that is going to be uncomfortable, that will allow us to get to these people here in America without destroying civil liberties and without basically destroying what this country stands for? There's got to be an answer.
Well, there's not one answer. I think there's many answers. But let me go back to a bigger picture. The thing that we have fundamentally failed at doing is taking a look at this problem set and developing a grand strategy, if you will, for how you deal with it. How do you deal with it internationally? How do you deal with it nationally? What are the political, military, economic, diplomatic, what are the tools that we could do? We were fighting in the Cold War, we were fighting the ism of communism. Today we're fighting the ism of radical Islamism. And just like we needed a grand strategy to defeat the Russia and former Soviet Union, we need a grand strategy to deal with this. And this administration has been unwilling to accept the fact that it needed to do so, and instead continues to try to fight this on the standpoint of law enforcement and pinprick military operations. That will not work. I mean, it's not that we're not doing enough.
All right, Mubin, you were involved in this, and the phrase that Rick used was grand strategy. Okay, you know how these people think. What is the key to a grand strategy, whether it's America, whether it's Belgium, whether it's the world, that at least starts to bother these people and at least starts to get into their kitchen, shake it around, and make some noise?
I think one thing which is indispensable is the Muslim community themselves. The Muslim communities know the terrain. They know their communities better than anyone else. You really can't come from the outside and just kind of show up and, get information or intelligence. I mean, you're going to need to develop, human intelligence operation networks. Maybe it's going to have to come down to, monetary rewards.
But haven't we been hearing this, Mubin, with all due respect, and again, this comes down to the part of my conversation here. Haven't we been hearing these things? These are cliches. We've been hearing this for a while. Get inside, put people on the inside, maybe pay them, all these things. When does it stop?
Well, I think, human intelligence is the best thing that we have. At the end of the day, it would be nice if we could just kill everyone. But the reality is, in the U.S., they're going to move towards law enforcement action. And that means arresting people, that means charging them, and that means spending the time and money to put them through a court system. And if your intelligence, if your evidence is not solid, is not going to pass the muster of an American court and an American judicial system, then we're wasting our time to begin with. So we need to understand what our intended result is on the back end and then frame our operations accordingly.
And what you're talking about is actual thinking processes here to make sure that we know where we're going instead of just stepping in randomly. I got a minute left. Rick, to you. We now hear U.S. officials say this group in Belgium is connected to the Paris attackers. Do we not need to start thinking that they are all connected in one way, shape, form, or another? This is not a cell here and a cell there. This is a global army, if you will, and until we start looking at them as that, we're never going to win.
I think you're right. I think it's one way to look at this organization is like a global insurgency. And an insurgency can't survive if they don't have a safe haven from which to operate. One of the first things that I think we need to do if we're going to dismantle this organization is to go into Syria, to make certain that you take Raqqa, to make certain that you don't leave this organization with a state apparatus from which they can operate. Big failure, I think, up to this point, and I think it's got to be one of the first things we do to turn this around.
20 seconds to you, Mubin. Do you think that's a good idea? Is that it? At least
I do
start
believe
there?
it's a good idea. I mean, we got to hit them hard in their strongholds, deny them the space, and then you will see trickle-down effects. They will start to break apart, but be also ready for other attacks as they start being degraded. Then they're taking hits. And this is one reason why you're going to start seeing more attacks. Like I said, this is not over.
There has to be a resolve, and it can't just be an American resolve. It has to be a European resolve. It has to be a Middle Eastern resolve. It has to be a Russian resolve. It has to be around the globe, or we're all in deep trouble. Rick Brennan, Mubin Shaikh, gentlemen, thanks so much for being so honest. We'll talk again. The shocking lack of preparedness for the Brussels attacks and the multiple European failures in the war against the Islamic killers. That's next as we continue right here on the fastest 60 minutes in news, The Hardline.